Caleb Morgan woke before sunrise, just as he did every morning on his ranch in northern Arizona. The air outside was cool and fresh, carrying the quiet promise of a long day. He stepped onto his porch, looked across the wide open land, and felt a calm he could never fully explain. For him, the land was not only home, it was the one place where he felt he truly belonged. The hills, the tall grass, and the sound of the early morning wind were like old friends he had known since childhood. On this particular morning, he had one simple plan. He wanted to ride into the hills and hunt for deer so he could fill the freezer before the cold season settled in. He took his time gathering supplies: a small bag, water, dried food, and a rope. He checked his horse, a calm chestnut mare named Ruby, and gave her a gentle pat on the neck before saddling her. When everything was ready, he mounted the horse and began riding slowly toward the rising sun. Caleb followed the familiar trail leading deeper into the hills. The sky slowly turned golden, lighting the rocky ridges in a warm glow. The day felt peaceful, as if nothing unusual could possibly happen. As he rode, he noticed how quiet the land was. No sound of cattle, no far-off voices, just the soft steps of Ruby and the occasional call of a distant bird. The peace made Caleb smile. Life on the ranch was hard at times, but moments like these reminded him why he never left. He moved deeper into the hills, following tracks he found near a dry stream bed. He dismounted, studied the prints, and guessed the deer had passed through recently. He continued on foot, letting Ruby walk behind him. The sun was higher now, warming his shoulders. He breathed in the smell of dry earth and juniper bushes. Everything seemed normal. Everything felt predictable. Yet the day was about to turn in a direction he never saw coming. As he moved across a narrow ridge, he suddenly heard something faint so soft that he almost thought he imagined it. It sounded like a breath, but not from an animal. It was a human sound, thin and weak. Caleb stopped walking. He tilted his head and listened again. Nothing. The silence stretched on, and he wondered if the wind had played a trick on him. But just as he took another step, he heard it again, a small, tired sound, almost like a quiet sigh or a whispered struggle. Caleb frowned and turned toward the sound. Something felt off. He had traveled these hills for years and rarely came across anyone out here. He followed the sound slowly, moving around a cluster of large rocks and dry shrubs. When he stepped past a fallen tree, he finally saw her. An Apache woman sat on the ground with her back against a large boulder. Her long, dark hair fell across her shoulders, and her clothes were dusty from the land. Her ankle looked swollen, and she held it gently with both hands. She lifted her head when she heard his footsteps, and her eyes widened in surprise and caution. For a moment, neither of them moved. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and determination, as if she was ready to defend herself even though she could barely stand. Caleb raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. He spoke calmly, letting his voice stay soft and steady. He told her he was just passing through and wanted to make sure she was all right. She did not answer at first. She looked at his clothes, his rope, his horse, and everything around him as if she was trying to judge whether he was safe. Caleb stayed exactly where he was, not stepping closer, waiting for her to speak first. Finally, she whispered her name, Naya. Her voice sounded tired, like someone who had been pushing herself for too long. When Caleb asked if she was hurt, she nodded and said she had slipped while traveling through the rocks. Her ankle twisted under her weight when she fell. She tried to stand again, to show she could manage, but she winced in pain and had to sit back down. Caleb saw the pain in her face and gently said she needed help. Naya looked away for a moment. Trusting a stranger, especially a rancher she did not know, was not something she took lightly. But she also knew she could not walk on her own. Caleb slowly stepped closer, watching her expression. When she did not push him away, he knelt a few feet from her and asked permission before checking her ankle. Even then, He did not touch her until she nodded. He carefully looked at the swelling and could tell it needed rest. Naya asked quietly if he had seen anyone else nearby earlier, and Caleb shook his head. She seemed to relax a bit upon hearing that. Whatever had brought her out here was personal, and she did not explain it yet. Caleb offered to help her back to his horse so he could take her somewhere safe. Naya hesitated. She looked around at the land, as if hoping she would suddenly find strength to walk on her own, but the pain would not let her. Eventually, she gave a small nod, signaling she would accept his help. Caleb helped her stand gently, letting her lean on his arm, without rushing her. She moved slowly and carefully, each step a small challenge. Ruby remained calm, sensing the situation, as horses often do. Caleb lifted Naya carefully onto the horse's back and made sure she was steady before walking beside the horse, letting her hold onto the saddle for support. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Caleb walked beside Ruby the entire way, making sure Naya was comfortable. He asked simple questions now and then if she needed water or if she was feeling dizzy, but he did not press her for details about who she was or why she was alone so far from home. Naya answered softly, speaking only when necessary. He could sense she was still cautious, but she no longer looked at him with fear. As the ranch finally came into view, Caleb noticed that Naya's expression changed slightly. She looked at the simple wooden house, the nearby barn, and the wide stretch of land around it. She seemed unsure about entering a stranger's home, but she did not ask him to stop. Caleb promised her she could rest only until her ankle felt strong enough to move again, and he would not force her to stay longer than she wished. That seemed to ease her mind a little. Caleb helped her down from the horse and guided her toward the porch where she could sit under the shade. He brought out a soft blanket, gave her cool water, and placed a small pillow behind her back to help her relax. Naya watched him with careful eyes, probably trying to understand why he was being so gentle. Caleb did not try to impress her or speak too much. He just moved quietly, treating her the way he believed anyone should be treated, with patience and respect. While Naya rested, Caleb cooked a simple meal inside soft bread, warm soup, and tea. When he brought it out to her, she accepted it with a small nod of thanks. The way she held the cup made him realize she was more exhausted than she had admitted. They sat together in the quiet ranch yard, the wind brushing across the dry grass. Naya slowly relaxed, her shoulders dropping as the warmth of the meal settled in her body. As the afternoon passed, the silence between them became comfortable. Caleb went about his chores near the house so she would not feel alone, and Naya watched the land with a thoughtful gaze. She told him a little about her connection to the hills, how she grew up learning the ways of her community, and how she understood the land in a way that went beyond maps and directions. Caleb listened carefully, respecting every word. By the time the sun began to set, Naya finally looked at him with a calmer, softer expression. She told him she did not know what she expected when he approached her in the hills, but she certainly did not expect kindness. Caleb smiled and told her the land teaches people to help one another because the land never promises easy days. Naya seemed to understand his meaning deeply. Caleb did not know what tomorrow would bring or how long Naya would stay. But one thing was clear. The moment he heard that faint sound in the hills, his quiet morning changed forever. He had set out to hunt, but life had placed something completely different in his path, something that already felt meaningful, even though the story had just begun. Naya woke the next morning feeling a mixture of comfort and confusion. She had expected to sleep poorly in a stranger's place, but the quiet ranch house made her feel surprisingly safe. The first thing she noticed was the smell of warm bread drifting through the open window. For a moment, she simply sat still, listening to the soft clatter of someone working in the kitchen. Caleb was already awake, moving around with the gentle rhythm of someone used to starting the day before the sun was fully up. The ranch was peaceful, covered in the soft light of early dawn. Naya tried to move her ankle and felt a sharp reminder that she still needed rest. She sighed quietly and leaned back, wondering how long she would have to rely on Caleb's help. Caleb stepped out onto the porch a few minutes later, carrying a small wooden tray. He smiled when he saw her awake. He told her he made simple breakfast bread, warm water with herbs, and a little honey. Naya thanked him softly, taking the tray with both hands. She ate slowly, watching him walk around the yard feeding the chickens and checking the barn. His movements were calm, steady, and respectful, never rushed or loud. She noticed that he always glanced toward her every few minutes, as if making sure she was okay without making her feel watched. It was a quiet kindness she had not expected from someone she had known for less than a day. After finishing his morning chores, Caleb returned and asked if she needed anything. He knelt down carefully near her ankle and checked the swelling. It was still tender, but not as bad as yesterday. Naya studied his face while he worked. There was no impatience in his eyes, no questions about why she had been alone in the hills. He simply wanted to help her heal. Nothing more. That sincerity softened her heart. People often spoke harshly or made assumptions about her, but Caleb seemed to see her simply as a human being in need of help. When she felt a bit stronger, she asked if she could sit outside for a while. Caleb helped her get comfortable on the porch chair, placing a cushion behind her back and adjusting it until she nodded with approval. She watched as he repaired a section of the fence, hammering nails with a slow, steady rhythm. The morning passed quietly. Birds chirped near the barn. The grass moved gently in the wind, and the sky grew brighter. Naya realized she had not felt this level of peace in many days. Around midday, Caleb brought out a bowl of warm stew. He set it on a small table beside her, and then sat on the step nearby. They shared the quiet meal without forcing conversation. But after a while, Caleb asked a simple question: how she was feeling. She answered honestly that her ankle still hurt, but her heart felt calmer. He smiled faintly and said that calm was important. Something about the way he said it made her trust him a little more. As the day went on, Caleb told her about the ranch. He explained how the land had belonged to his family for generations, and how he took care of it mostly alone now. He mentioned the long days during the dry summers, the unpredictable storms in the monsoon season, and the quiet winters, when the world seemed to slow down. Naya listened with interest. She respected people who understood the land deeply, and from the way Caleb spoke, she could tell he cared about every corner of his ranch. After listening for a while, Naya shared small details about her own life too. She told him about her childhood in her community, how she grew up learning to read tracks, how she learned to move quietly through the hills. She spoke about the stories her elders told her, stories connected to the earth, the sky, and the animals. Caleb listened carefully, not interrupting, not doubting. He was not pretending to understand everything, but he respected every word. That respect made Naya feel safe enough to keep talking. Later in the afternoon, she asked him how long he had lived alone. Caleb paused before answering. He said he had been alone for many years, not because he disliked people, but because life had taken him in that direction. He had learned to rely on himself, but even then, some days felt too quiet, too still. Naya understood that feeling. She had also walked through lonely moments, even while surrounded by people. Loneliness was not always about being alone. Sometimes it was about being unseen. And Caleb, she sensed, had been unseen for a long time. As the afternoon warmed, a gentle breeze swept through the yard. Naya asked if she could sit closer to the grass. Caleb helped her walk slowly down the steps, supporting her as lightly as possible so she would not feel helpless. He placed a blanket on the ground so she could sit comfortably. The dry grass brushed softly against her hands as she leaned back, feeling the earth beneath her. Caleb sat a short distance away, giving her space but staying close enough in case she needed help. They talked about the land, the seasons, and the changing sky. It was simple talk, but it felt meaningful. At one point, Naya noticed Caleb watching a group of birds fly overhead. His eyes softened, as if he were remembering something. When she asked what he was thinking, he told her that his father used to say people could learn much from the way birds moved, how they knew when to stay, when to leave, and how to trust the wind. Naya smiled faintly and said her elders taught something similar. That small connection made both of them feel a little closer. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Caleb offered to show her a safer way to stretch her ankle. He demonstrated carefully, letting her copy the movements slowly. She appreciated that he did not touch her without permission. He asked every time, and if she hesitated, he waited. His patience felt steady and comforting. She realized he had a gentle way of guiding without taking over. In the evening, Caleb lit the lantern on the porch and brought a warm cup of tea. Naya took the cup with both hands, feeling its warmth spread through her fingers. The quiet ranch yard glowed softly in the golden lantern light. She sat back and looked at the hills in the distance. For the first time in several days, she did not feel the rush to keep moving. Her heart felt a calm she had not expected to find here. Caleb sat on the porch step again. After a long silence, he finally asked the question he had held back all day. He asked where she had been going before he found her. Naya took a slow breath. She did not reveal everything, but she explained she had needed time to think, to be alone, to understand her own path. She told him she had been walking for many miles, listening to her thoughts and the wind, until her ankle failed her. Caleb nodded slowly, accepting her explanation without pushing for more. Naya noticed something about him in that moment. He did not try to fix her problems or judge her decisions. He simply accepted that she had her own journey, her own reasons. That level of respect warmed her heart in a way she had not expected. As the stars began to appear, Caleb told her she did not have to explain anything she did not want to. He said she was free to leave when she was ready, and free to stay until she could walk safely. Naya felt a wave of relief. Freedom was important to her, and knowing that he respected that made her trust him even more. The night grew cooler, and Caleb brought her a blanket before returning to his chores. Naya watched him work, feeding Ruby, checking the barn doors, and making sure everything was secure before night settled. His steady nature, his thoughtful silence, and his gentle way of caring made her feel something she had not felt in a long time, safe, seen, and valued. When Caleb finally returned to the porch, Naya looked at him with a calm she had not felt since before her fall. She told him softly that she was grateful for his help. He simply nodded and said that sometimes the land brings people together for reasons they do not understand yet. Naya looked at the stars and wondered if he was right. She had come here by accident, hurt and tired. But now, as she sat on the porch of a quiet ranch with a man who treated her with kindness and patience, she felt something unexpected growing inside her. She did not know where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. Trust was forming between them, slow and gentle, like a small flame growing in the dark. And that trust was the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. The days passed quietly, and Naya's ankle slowly began to regain strength. She could stand longer now, take a few careful steps, and even help with small tasks around the ranch. Caleb never pushed her to do more than she could. He always reminded her to move slowly, to rest when needed, and to listen to her body. That steady patience made her feel respected and understood. But neither of them expected that a sudden crisis would soon test both of them in a way they had never imagined and pull them even closer. One afternoon, the sky began to shift in a strange way. The wind, which had been gentle all morning, suddenly picked up speed. The clouds thickened quickly and gathered above the hills like a heavy gray blanket. Caleb noticed it first, while filling a bucket near the barn. He paused, looked at the sky carefully, and felt a familiar worry rise in his chest. He had seen this kind of weather before. A fast-moving storm, strong, unpredictable, and dangerous for a ranch with open land and frightened animals. Caleb set the bucket down and walked toward the porch where Naya was sitting, with her ankle propped up. She immediately sensed something in his expression. Before she could ask, he told her that a storm was rolling in much faster than usual. He explained that storms in this region could strike hard, heavy winds, sudden rain, and loud thunder that could startle the cattle. If the cattle panicked and scattered, they could be injured, lost, or trapped in rocky areas. Naya looked at the sky and understood the danger. Caleb began gathering rope, tools, and feed quickly. He told her gently that she needed to stay near the house for safety, but Naya shook her head. Her ankle still hurt, but she was strong enough to walk and think clearly. She had lived through storms in the wild many times. She knew how to read the wind and the land. She told Caleb she could help. At first, he hesitated, worried her ankle might worsen. But when he looked into her eyes, he realized she had no intention of staying behind while he faced the danger alone. They moved together quickly toward the cattle field. The wind was growing stronger by the minute. Dust swirled around their feet. The sky darkened further, and the air felt tense. The cattle sensed the shift too. They were restless, pacing in uneven circles, letting out low, uneasy sounds. Caleb opened the gate slowly, trying not to startle them further, while Naya stood beside him, scanning the field with sharp, trained eyes. The wind howled louder. A deep rumble of thunder rolled across the land, and a streak of lightning flashed far away. Several cattle panicked immediately, running toward the far end of the field. Caleb cursed under his breath and started after them. Naya moved more slowly but followed closely behind. Her steps careful and balanced. She called out softly to the animals, using calm, rhythmic tones she had learned from her elders. Her voice, steady and low, carried through the tension of the storm. Caleb noticed something remarkable. Whenever Naya spoke, the animals slowed down, not fully calm, but less frightened. He realized she had a way of communicating with them that he had never seen before. He watched her walk toward the most frightened cow, moving slowly with open hands, as if asking permission to approach. The cow stopped running, breathing heavily, but it did not bolt away. Naya continued speaking gently, and soon the animal's breathing steadied. Caleb was amazed. "Keep talking to them," he said, raising his voice over the wind. "It's working." Naya gave a small nod, keeping her focus. Together, they guided the cattle toward a safer area near the eastern fence, where the land sloped downward and the wind hit with less force. Caleb used his rope to secure the lead cow while Naya calmed the others with her voice. The storm grew closer. Another flash of lightning lit the sky, followed by a louder crash of thunder. Caleb felt a surge of urgency. He needed to move the herd before the real force of the storm hit. Rain began to fall sharp, fast drops that struck their faces and soaked their clothes. Caleb pulled his hat lower against the wind, while Naya brushed her wet hair away from her eyes. She pointed toward a small rocky outcrop that could shield the cattle from the worst of the storm. Caleb agreed. Instantly. They needed shelter fast. Working together, they guided the cattle across the muddy ground. Caleb pulled, pushed, and coaxed the animals forward, while Naya continued using her calming voice. There were moments when Caleb felt overwhelmed, the wind pushing against him, the rain blinding his vision, the mud making every step heavy. At one point, he slipped on the wet ground and nearly fell. Naya reached out quickly, steadying him with surprising strength despite her healing ankle. Their eyes met for a second, and Caleb felt a spark of gratitude and something deeper. They kept moving. Step by step, yard by yard, they guided the cattle toward the rocky shelter. The storm roared around them now, wind whipping like a wild animal, thunder rolling across the sky, rain pouring in heavy sheets. Caleb felt his heart pounding, not only from the struggle but from the fear of losing the herd, or worse, watching Naya get hurt. But she remained calm, focused, moving with a kind of natural confidence he had rarely seen in anyone. Finally, after what felt like hours, though it had only been minutes, they reached the sheltered area. Caleb guided the last cow inside and secured the gate. Naya stood beside him, breathing heavily but steady. The cattle huddled together, calmer now, protected from the worst of the storm. Caleb leaned against the fence and let out a long breath of relief. His hands were shaking from the effort. Naya placed her hand lightly on the fence, watching the storm with thoughtful eyes. She told Caleb that the land always spoke before storms, like this one. The wind, the birds, even the silence had tried to warn them earlier. Caleb listened, realizing how much he still had to learn about reading the land beyond his usual signs. When the storm finally began to slow, the rain softened into a steady drizzle. Caleb looked at Naya, soaked from head to toe, mud on her clothes, hair stuck to her cheeks but standing strong, steady, and proud. She had helped him save the ranch in a way he could never repay. He told her softly, "I couldn't have done this without you." Naya looked down for a moment, shaken by the honesty in his voice. She told him she simply did what was right, what anyone would do. But Caleb shook his head. Not anyone could move with such calm in a storm. Not anyone could calm an entire herd with just their presence. She was different, strong, grounded, deeply connected to the land. Her help had made the impossible possible. The walk back to the house was slow. The storm clouds drifted away, leaving behind a sky washed clean by rain. The smell of wet earth filled the air. Naya walked carefully, leaning only a little on Caleb when her ankle hurt. He kept his arm close, but never pushed, allowing her to decide how much support she needed. When they reached the porch, they were both exhausted. Caleb brought warm towels, helped her dry off, and made a hot drink to warm their hands. Naya sat quietly, watching the clouds drifting in the distance. Caleb sat beside her, still catching his breath. After a long silence, Naya spoke softly. She told him that storms reveal truths, how people react, what they value, and how deeply they respect the land. Caleb understood what she meant. He had seen her bravery, her calmness, her wisdom, and she had seen his determination, kindness, and quiet strength. In that shared struggle, something had shifted between them. They were no longer strangers, brought together by an accident. They were partners in survival. They had trusted each other with their safety, their decisions, and their instincts. And now, sitting on the porch after the storm, they felt a closeness neither expected, but both felt deeply. Caleb looked at her with a new understanding. Naya met his gaze with the same quiet honesty. They did not speak further about the storm or their feelings, but the silence between them felt warm, gentle, and full of unspoken connection. What happened that day changed how they saw each other. The storm had tested them, but it had also tied their lives together in a way that could not be undone. The morning after the storm, the ranch felt different. The air was clean, the sky looked wider, and everything had a quiet shine from the night's heavy rain. Caleb stepped out early to check the cattle, expecting trouble after such a powerful storm, but he found the herd safe. They were calm, grazing peacefully near the rocks where he and Naya had guided them. He stood there for a long moment, hands resting on the fence, thinking about how close he had come to losing them and how impossible it would have been to manage alone. He kept replaying the storm in his mind, the rushing wind, the heavy rain, the anxious cattle, and beside every memory was Naya. Her calm voice, her steady steps, and her strength that surprised him again and again. When Caleb returned to the house, Naya was sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was still a little damp, but she looked more rested. She watched him quietly as he approached, and he could tell she had also been thinking. He asked her how her ankle felt, and she told him with a small, gentle smile that it hurt, but not as badly as before. "The storm," she said softly, had reminded her of things she had forgotten: strength, instinct, and the power of trusting someone beside her. Caleb made them both warm tea and sat with her on the porch. They talked about simple things at first: the smell of wet soil, the clear morning sky, the sound of the birds returning after the storm. But the quiet between them had changed. It felt fuller, warmer, as if the storm had washed away whatever distance existed before. As the day went on, Naya tried to help around the ranch, but Caleb insisted she sit and rest. He had noticed her slight limp and did not want her hurt again. Still, she did small things: folded blankets, swept the porch, and prepared herbs to help her ankle heal faster. While working, she watched Caleb move across the yard. There was a gentle strength in the way he handled everything, from feeding the animals to repairing the fence. He was a man shaped by the land, steady, patient, and humble. She found peace in that. Later, Caleb asked if she wanted to take a short walk to the small hill behind the barn. The path was smooth and safe, and the view was beautiful after rain. Naya agreed, and he walked beside her, ready to catch her if she stumbled. She moved slowly, placing each step carefully, but she liked the feel of the earth under her feet again. When they reached the top of the hill, they both stopped. From there, the whole ranch stretched out before them: green patches, muddy pathways, and the quiet shapes of cattle resting near the rocks. The distant hills, freshly washed by rain, looked sharper and brighter. The sky was a deep, soft blue. Naya breathed in deeply. The land smelled new. Caleb watched her quietly, sensing the emotions on her face. She looked peaceful, but there was also a sadness in her eyes. He asked what she was thinking. For a moment, she hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. Then she told him that her ankle was almost healed. Soon, she would be able to walk without pain. And when that day came, she would have to return to her people. He knew she would leave. He had always known. She did not belong to him or to the ranch. She belonged to a community, a culture, a history, older than anything he could imagine. But hearing her say it made his heart tighten. He kept his voice steady and told her he understood. He wanted her to heal fully, and he wanted her to go back safely. She looked at him then with eyes that held both gratitude and something deeper. They walked back in silence, but it was not heavy silence. It was thoughtful, filled with unspoken feelings neither had the courage to release. That evening, Caleb cooked a warm meal, and they ate together on the porch. The sun set behind the hills, turning the sky orange and pink. They watched it quietly, each lost in thought. Naya finally spoke, her voice soft. She told Caleb that kindness like his was rare. Not many people offered help without expecting something in return. Not many listened without judgment. She admitted she had been nervous when he first found her, unsure of his intentions. But now she felt something she had not felt in a long time: safe, respected, and understood. Caleb listened with a quiet ache in his chest. He told her the truth, too, that he had lived alone for many years, and her presence brought warmth back into his home, warmth he didn't know he had been missing. The next few days passed gently. Naya's ankle healed more with each sunrise. She could walk across the yard without holding on to anything. She helped Caleb clean the barn, gather herbs, and prepare meals. Caleb showed her old tools his father had used, and she told him stories from her childhood, stories of her people, their traditions, their celebrations, their connection to nature. These stories fascinated Caleb. They opened a window into a world he had never known but deeply respected. On the fourth morning, Naya woke with almost no pain in her ankle. She knew, in her heart, what this meant. The decision she had been postponing was now standing in front of her. She needed to go home. She needed to tell Caleb. But when she stepped onto the porch, she found Caleb already waiting with 2 horses saddled. He had understood, without her saying a word. He told her he would take her as far as she wished, near the hills, or to the edge of her community. Wherever she needed to go, he would walk beside her. Naya felt her throat tighten. She nodded slowly. Together, they rode across the quiet land. The wind was soft, the sun warm. Neither spoke much during the journey. Their silence was full of everything they could not say aloud. When they reached the place where the land began to rise and twist toward her community, Naya stopped her horse. She looked around, taking in the open land, the peaceful hills, and Caleb sitting quietly beside her. The moment felt heavier than the storm. She dismounted slowly. Caleb followed. They stood facing each other. The horses behind them, the wind brushing through the grass. Naya tried to speak, but her voice broke. Instead, she stepped closer, placing her hand gently on his chest, a simple gesture, but full of feeling. Caleb covered her hand with his own. His eyes softened with emotion. He didn't ask her to stay. He didn't question her decision. He simply told her that she would always have a place on his land, a place in his life, no matter how far she traveled. Naya felt tears gather in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She told him softly that she had come here by accident, but the peace she found, the kindness she received, and the connection they built were no accident at all. She believed the land had guided their paths together. She stepped back, gave him one last long look, and then turned toward the hills. Her steps were slow, careful, and heavy with emotion. Caleb watched her until she disappeared behind the rocks. Then he stood alone, letting the wind carry away the weight in his chest. Days passed. Caleb worked on the ranch, feeding the cattle, repairing fences, and cooking meals for one. The house felt quiet again. Too quiet. He tried to convince himself that the peace he had before she came was enough, but it wasn't. The ranch no longer felt the same without her presence, the soft sound of her voice, the gentle way she moved, the quiet wisdom she brought with her. He didn't know if he would ever see her again. Then, one evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he heard footsteps near the fence. Ruby lifted her head, as if recognizing someone. Caleb turned slowly, hardly daring to believe what he felt in his heart. Naya stood there, dust on her boots, wind in her hair, a calm smile on her face. She said softly that she had returned not because she had nowhere else to go, but because her heart led her back to the place where she felt seen. She wanted to learn more about his world. She wanted to share more of hers. She wanted to build something slow, steady, and real. Caleb felt the breath leave his chest. He stepped toward her, his expression warm, relieved, and full of quiet joy. She moved toward him, and the distance they once had was gone now, washed away by storms, healed by time, strengthened by trust. The ranch was no longer a place of silence. It was a place of new beginnings, two lives, two paths, becoming one story.